my wife Jackie.
Remember to sign in.
Remember to sign in. And if you have homework, you can put it in the envelope. If you haven't done an application yet, please still do that. They're on the table. It helps us to tailor the lessons. This is Arise, and we are in week 2 of the book, the second session, The 7 Desires of the Heart. You need a book? Do we have any more books?
Oh, I'll grab them. They're all in my office.
If you need a book, Jackie's gonna go get some. They're $12. Just goes to the church. Don't be shy if you need a book. It'll be a lot easier for you to follow along. All right, so quick review. What did we talk about last week? If you were here.
Iceberg theory. Yep.
We talked about the iceberg theory. Yes. What about the iceberg theory?
Seen on the outside.
The behavior is that 10% that you can usually see of an iceberg. Right? Some icebergs can actually be mountains in the ocean. Not all of them, but some of them go way down. And usually you only see about 10% at most, which causes the accidents and boats that get sunk, right? So it's all of that stuff underneath there, the iceberg model. Dr. Satir is trying to point out to us that it's all of the stuff underneath. In fact, let me give you a clue into yourself, even though you're adults. I work with teenage boys and girls now. Toward the end of my career, I started with boys in '86, and I'm getting toward the end here. And what they love most about some staff.
I'm sorry, I got called out, I believe, but, I'm sorry, can I get one of the handouts?
Oh, yeah.
Cause that helps me, even though I'm,
Absolutely.
it won't use that. Thank you, Mike,
Good-
sorry for the interruption.
Good to see you, Nick.
Yeah,
I think we're gonna hand them off this thing. So what the kids love being in the treatment center is they love when staff only focus on their behavior, because they can fake us out with the behavior. What they hate is to have to talk to me and other therapists and stuff about what's really going on. Why are you here at this treatment center? They don't, and so they do all kinds of stuff, you know, they break stuff, they run down the hall, and because they want you to focus. Some staff fall right into that, even though we train them. So the point of me sharing that with you is that don't deceive yourself by showing by showing some behavior and burying all the other stuff underneath, right? The coping strategies, the feelings about feelings, that's the stuff we talked about last week. Anybody need a book? Get a book, get a book, get a book. All right, book. Very good. Okay. So this week, we're gonna talk about, the desire to be affirmed. So last week, we talked about heard and understood. What was that about? What were we talking about last week with heard and understood? Okay, we're back to quiet.
We want people to hear us, to hear our complaints or the things that are bothering us, and we want them to understand, not just hear us, but to understand.
When you are heard and understood, you feel affirmed. You feel validated, and you feel generally good about yourself, even if you were talking about some type of struggle, right? So it's very important. What do we say about being heard and understood? What's the best way to hear or to be heard and understood? To listen. To be a good listener, right? And so sometimes we think we need to do a lot of talking, and most of the time we don't need to do as much talking as we need to do listening and just being honest, right? So being heard and understood is the first desire of all of our hearts. Everybody wants to be, you know, with kids. I grew up in a family where the saying was, kids are to be seen and not heard. That's not good. That's inaccurate. Kids need to be seen and heard. Being heard validates their thinking and their ideas. It tells them that they're important and they're not weird, right? But I grew up in a family where kids, you know, were not allowed to talk to adults really, unless you were addressed by an adult. And you were just seen sometimes and you were not heard. And that had an impact on me. Okay, so tonight, we're gonna start talking about the second desire, which is to be affirmed. Right? So everybody got a handout? Super. Pastor Stephanie doesn't have a handout. Pastor Stephanie. Okay. So, affirmed, affirmations are about what we do. Okay, and I always like to add a little bit there to the authors that it's also about what we attempt. We don't accomplish everything we attempt, but basically affirmations are about what we do. How good it feels when someone says, nice job, good work, or way to go, versus an anti-affirmation of, you're an idiot, you're fired, you know, go sit in the corner. That's an anti-affirmation, right? So we want to be careful about that. We all want to believe that someone approves of what we do. All of us want to feel like we contribute something and that people appreciate what it is that we do. That's not bad, that's a good thing. And so one of the ways to build and deepen relationships is to become someone who affirms others. If you become someone who affirms others, people will seek you out. Right? So between 2008 and 2015, I was working still for the Department of Corrections as an assistant regional chief here in Milwaukee. This happened by accident, really. But then I recognized it. So one Friday, I was working at the main office up on Port Road, just north of Capitol. I don't know, 150 people in that big building. It was the regional office. So we had about 100 agents out there, and at least 10 supervisors of the 31 field supervisors were in that building. And so one Friday, you know, we're all dressed casual like this. And I went out to get a soda or something from the vending machine. And I ran into an employee who looked frustrated. Hey, what's going on? Well, you know, it's been a rough week and nobody seems to appreciate me. And this guy went AWOL, and I got another guy who's sitting in the Waukesha County, you know, she was probation and parole agent, she was frustrated. So I affirmed her. I said, you know, you put in a good, hard week of work. I want you to know that we appreciate this from the regional office. And I think I shook her hand. So then, as I'm walking away from her, the next agent says to me, well, what about me? Kind of jokingly, but, so I affirmed her, and then the next agent, so I ended up going through the whole building. It took me like an hour. So the next Friday, I do the same thing. I did this for like 7 or 8 weeks in a row, and then her and I went out of town on a Friday, came back on Monday, and people were, where were you on Friday? I missed my affirmation, and you know, and it started off just, if you affirm people, people will seek you out, and you will get a chance to speak, trust me, into someone else's life, because people appreciate being heard and understood, and they appreciate being affirmed. B, 1B. When we are young, people can represent God's love to us if they are affirming. We feel confident. If they are not affirming or even critical, anti-affirmation, we feel inadequate or incapable. So kids, you know, if you take your kids to church or whatever and you're teaching them, oh, that there is a God and God loves you, they don't really have a concept of God. They are looking at you and me, right? Mom and dad become God. And the way you treat them talks to them about God, the God that you're talking about and all of this other stuff. So be very careful, if you have young kids, that you are a good example to them, that you hear and understand their heart, that you affirm them for what they do and what they attempt to do. 1C, affirmation tells us that we are doing well and to keep it up, right? So if you want to encourage someone, you give them an affirmation. Anybody in here ever run like a 26-mile marathon? You have, all right. Did you have any affirmation along the way?
Yeah, sure.
Did it help?
Sure, oh yeah,
Yeah.
sure does.
Now, I've never run 26 miles, but I've done like 10 miles, and to have somebody or some bodies along the way saying, hey, here's some Gatorade, or you can do it, keep it up, that's very encouraging, right? To not have that, man, you can get in your head, and your body starts telling you to stop. What are you doing? Don't do this, you're crazy, it hurts, and that self-talk can get us going. All right, so affirmation tells us we're doing well and to keep it up. Criticism tells us that we have messed up, or that we are messed up. The quest for affirmation continues throughout our whole life and may keep us from trying new things out of fear. So one of the things as a counselor, when I start working with someone, if they have a lot of fears, I can almost always guarantee they haven't been affirmed. And they likely haven't been heard and understood. In fact, most cases, nothing's always 100%, but most cases, they've been anti-affirmed. You're stupid, you're defective, what's wrong with you? Don't ever ask your kids, especially little kids, what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with them, they're being kids. Human growth and development. That question is so negative, it plants the seed, there's something wrong with me. And particularly if you keep asking them that. What's wrong with you? Why would you do that? That was so stupid. These are mistakes that I made with our kids until I learned better. But that is a terrible question, and it's actually a statement to them that there's something wrong with me. So be very careful. We don't even want to say it to each other as adults, right? She says to me once or twice a week, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? What is wrong with leaving the garbage in the middle of the kitchen? No, I don't. Just kidding.
Just by the door.
By the door. 1D, a people pleaser, and a people pleaser is one of these 6 self-defeating learned behaviors. A people pleaser seeks affirmation from others for a negative reason, because they have a fear of being alone. This can lead to intimacy disorder, right? Doing anything to keep family and friends in your life. And so, this church does not teach divorce. And so I want everybody to understand that, right? So I always joke, and I'm not really joking, if you're married, you're stuck. We can try to help you get some marriage counseling with one of the pastors, or if they're busy, we can try to help out. But beyond the marriage relationship, be very careful that you don't become a people pleaser and a doormat, and people just walk all over. You're doing anything to keep people in your life, and it's not healthy for you. God did not call us to be a doormat, right? He did not call us to be abused. Again, if you're married, that's a different relationship. We want to help you with that. We want you to work on that. But, short of that, be very, very careful. People pleasers deny who they are. They set aside their own personalities and attitudes and desires out of desperation of trying to keep someone in their life. And I'm just going to tell you, as a counselor, a lot of times it isn't always good who they're trying to keep in their life. Now, I'm not talking about the parent-child relationship. These are friends, or could even be a sibling that you're not getting along with right now. You gotta be very careful that you don't fall into this intimacy disorder. You lose yourself. God created you to be you, and you do anything to just keep people in your life. All right, and 1E, concerns about affirmation manifest itself in 2 ways: by lying and imperfectionism. So when we get concerned about affirmation, we will often lie or become grandiose and, I'm a pilot and I fly internationally, and you've never even been on a plane, right? Because trying to affirm yourself, you're being grandiose, and, oh yeah, you know, I spend weekends at the White House with the president, him and I are just like this. Really? Some people do that, right? So the line and or perfectionism, right? So you pretend that you are perfect in everything because you've experienced some failures and you've experienced some anti-affirmation, some discouragement. You've been told you're defective or what's wrong with you, you're weird, you're strange, you're crazy. And so we on the outside pretend that we're perfect. And we try to demand that everybody around us become perfect. Any questions about affirmation? That was a quick, dirty, short overview of affirmation, but you'll read about it. And hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense to you. But any questions at this point? So let me ask you a question before I turn it over to Jacques Lee. When was the last time you were affirmed? I want you to think about that. Was it today? Yesterday? Was it this week? Last week? I mean, when was the last time you were affirmed? Someone said, good job, or thanks for doing that, or man, I can see you're working hard on this. And then the other question is just the opposite. When was the last time you affirmed someone? So before I turn, I'll just give you this little example. Every Friday night, unless, you know, there's like a musical here at the church, we do date night. And sometimes we're counseling Monday, Tuesday, we do this Wednesday, sometimes I meet with people on Thursday. So Friday night is for us. And we either go out to eat or we order in and we try to find a movie that we can watch, which isn't always easy. But especially if we go out to eat, as soon as we get in the car, she will always say to me, thanks for taking me out to dinner. Now, she works full-time just like I do. The money goes in one pot. But she'll say, and I'll say, well, thanks. So we try to out-thank each other. We try to out-affirm each other. She'll say, thanks for taking me out to dinner. I'll say, thanks for going with me and enjoying it. And she'll say, thanks for paying. And you know, until we can't find anything else that, you know, she'll say, thanks for driving. All right. So, if you become an affirmer, you become powerful because people want to hear what you have to say. Keep that in mind, because if you want to be heard and understood, one of the ways to do that is to become an affirmer. She's whispering that we should have put it's too late now, I already did the review. She wanted me to put the iceberg novel back up here.
We should have put it back up.
You and Dorothy, for crying out loud. I have to
Especially
take
for those who
everything
weren't here
seriously.
last week. We didn't see it.
By the way, I just wanna say that high five you guys do, I think that's great, a great affirmation to one another too.
We're actually tagging in and out like it's a wrestling match. We're turning to wrestle with you. But thanks for recognizing. I received that affirmation.
So any questions about that second desire, affirm?
Yep, not to get ahead, but being affirmed is for doing something, being blessed is for doing nothing.
Right, for just being who we are.
Okay.
We're blessed,
So
just,
to be affirmed, you do something first.
Right.
or attempt to.
Or attempt to.
Because you know, we don't always accomplish everything we attempt to do. Thanks.
Good job. Good job.
Good job.
Affirming his scratch, or his itch. Okay, now we're gonna start talking about, oh, and by the way, reading for this week is chapters 3 and 4, points of ponder will be over there, at the end of class for 3 and 4. And for anyone who just came in, you'll read all the way up to chapter 4.
They're short chapters.
Yeah, but, yeah, I was gonna say, it's easy reading, it's very easy reading. In fact, once you start, at least for me, once I started reading, I didn't wanna put it down, cause it's really good. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the truth about who you are. 2A there says, we are born with 7 desires deep in our hearts, and God put them there on purpose. God put them there so that we will eventually learn how to seek Him, to meet those needs, and how to relate intimately with others. So God uses other people to meet these 7 desires, but ultimately, He's the one that supplies it. And many times, He's the only one that can supply it. So even in marriage, when you're married to someone, okay, what's the ratio? 80? 80% of my needs can be met by him as my husband. Vice versa, the same thing. 20% of those needs will never be able to be met by him. They have to be met by God. So, more often than not, in marriage, what ends up happening is spouses start to focus on the 20% instead of being thankful for the 80%. And that's when trouble starts. You know, why didn't you take the garbage out sooner? You know, blah, blah, blah. And we end up nitpicking on that 20% rather than being thankful for the 80%. What?
No, listen.
What?
I was just gonna give you a quick example to drive that home. I was working with a couple years ago, and this guy liked to go to the tavern every night after work and drink and whatever. And his wife was very frustrated, so I'm working with them, and God begins to touch his heart. And so he stays home, and he only goes to the tavern like twice in a week. Used to be 6 to 7 days, even, you know, Saturday and Sunday. And she was complaining, we're in a sense, she's complaining, and I said, wait a minute. I said, you need to affirm the change, right? So he adjusted his behavior in terms of how often he went, but it was a good thing, he was headed in the right direction. I said, because would you rather have him home 5 days or at the tavern 7 days?
And he was sitting and watching TV, that was her big
Yeah,
thing.
he was.
All he does is sit and watch TV. Well, but he's not at the bar drinking, so you think.
Progress over perfection.
Yeah. Okay, 2B says, we live in a fallen world where there are no perfect homes, churches, neighborhoods, or cultures that can give us, I can't read tonight, that can give us all of our heart's desires. Because of that, many times we obtain wounds, and we're going to start talking about 2 different types of wounds tonight, and I'll just preface it by saying this lesson is probably the most challenging or most emotional for anyone who has experienced these types of wounds. So, like doing your worksheet this week, if you can't do it all in one sitting, that's fine. Spread it out, because it will be emotional if you've experienced either one of these types of wounds. So because of that, many times we obtain wounds that when we are young. There are 2 main types of wounds that people experience. And we're going to talk about this first one. The first type of wound happens when something happens to you that shouldn't happen. Boundaries were crossed, which is called being invaded. This one is very difficult because more often than not, the invasion happens by someone that we know and trust. And once it happens, it can cause very deep wounds. This is usually caused by abuse of some type, physically hurt, emotionally wounded, spiritually misguided, or sexually abused. if you have this type of wound and you do not work through it, it will come out in your relationship eventually. More often than not, unfortunately, it doesn't come out until after a person is married. Because, you know, I don't know if it's Americanized, I don't know what the thing is. We have counseled couples who, when we are having lots of difficulties in different areas, and we've questioned them, I'm like, what did you talk about when you were dating? Oh, I don't know, just like what colors we like and how we would like to go on trips, and, you know, I'm like, whoa. You know, you should have been talking about your life experiences, things like this, if you've had wounds of any kind, you know, how many children do you expect to have in this relationship? Who's gonna take care of the money? You know, the important things of relationships. And so then people get married, they haven't talked about these types of things, and then, you know, well, the husband wants to be intimate, and the wife is like, get away from me, you know, you remind me of Uncle Joe, and I hate him, and blah, blah, blah. And it's very sad, because those types of things could have been worked out way before a relationship was established. Anything to add?
No, you're on a roll.
Okay. Okay, and then the second one, oh, I'm sorry, I should have explained this. So on this side, excuse me, there are all different types of the invasion behaviors. There's emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual, and this is not an extensive list. Obviously, there are a lot of other ways that a person can be invaded. Now, I was raised in a dysfunctional family, and I know that now, but when I was growing up, I didn't think it was dysfunctional. I thought, well, this is just normal, and I didn't think I had, you know, I wasn't invaded. But then when I started looking at this, I was like, wow, I was invaded. My dad was a yeller and a screamer, and mainly because he was never heard and understood. And again, what is if the pain that isn't transformed will be transferred. That was only 2 people that said that. Wait a minute. The pain that isn't transformed will be transferred. That was a little better. And so my dad transferred that. He transferred it to all 6 of us kids. Yelling and screaming and put downs and just on and on. I started looking at this and I was like, wow, I did have a lot of invasion in my life. On the other side, look.
So in that first column where it says emotional, you're gonna see a box that says mind rape. I just like to explain because that's a strong term. So what that really is saying is that you are invalidating someone else's feelings, right? And so we start this with our kids, especially boys. If they trip and fall and skin themselves, you know, you're not hurt. Of course I'm hurt. I'm hurting here.
Don't cry.
You're not hurt, you know, don't cry. So it's telling other people they should not experience particularly pain that they're going through. And that's very damaging. Be very careful of that, right? When I was doing domestic abuse counseling, I'd be working with these guys who, you know, beat their girlfriends or wives. And their big hang up was that she just needs to forgive me. She needs to get over it. And so I would say to them, okay, if I hit you as hard as I can, and I tell you, hey, just get up, get back in your chair, and let's get on with the group, get over it. That's not gonna work, right? So it's invalidating, it's non-affirming, it's telling someone, you should not be experiencing the emotion, usually pain that you're experiencing. Usually caused by the one who's telling you not to, you know, do it.
Yeah, or get over it. Okay, so then on the flip side, it is blank, and this is for you. You can use this to, again, when we go back into our childhood and our adolescence, we're looking for facts. not to find fault. You're just looking for facts of what happened to you, what experiences you have had, and then you can look at it. You can, kind of use it as an analyst of yourself. Is there some area that I was invaded, that is affecting me now? Is there something that I need to, maybe go seek a counselor about and talk it through and get some healing on that?
So these you're not gonna turn in?
No.
This is not homework,
For you.
this is just for you. In fact, you don't have to share it with anyone if you don't want to, cause this can be some deep stuff. So this is not homework that you turn in. This is for you just to go through, to
Right.
realize some things. Obviously, if you wanna talk about it, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, and then the second one on your sheet there, the second happens when you don't get your basic needs and desires met, which is called being abandoned. And Mike is gonna tell us that. Abandoned. Abandonment and neglect are oftentimes subtle and silent, and it takes longer to notice what is missing, what is the norm. So, did you take mine, Williams?
Did I take them all?
I think so. Took mine.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, if you look at your sheet there, the abandonment behaviors, are emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual again. And a lot, again, when I looked at my life, I thought, I was raised in a pretty good home. But when I started looking at this, the lack of care and nurturing, the lack of affirmation, I actually had, what Mike called the anti-affirmation, where not only did we not get affirmed, but I was told I was a mistake, you're ugly. And of course, my dad was talking about my attitude, but I took it as you're ugly, physically. So, again, this is for you. On the other side is blank. You can use it if you'd like, if you think it's too much for you. Obviously, there's no way that we wanna cause anyone any harm, but anything that is swept under the rug long enough is going to cause problems. It's going to come out. And we're gonna talk a little bit about, triggers and landmines and stuff coming up. This is where triggers and landmines come from, because we have an event or events in our life, they cause these wounds, then we sweep it under the rug because we don't wanna deal with it, because it is painful. It is painful to look at things. After a while, what happens when you start sweeping things under the rug, it gets bulges and bumps, and it will come out, especially if you try to get into a relationship. And we're built, right? God built us for relationships.
Now, we wanna be very careful, we are not accusing your parents. So don't let us if you had a good childhood, wonderful. We're just saying, we always go back to childhood in case so don't think, oh, I gotta say something on here. If you had a great childhood, praise the Lord. If you did not, or adolescence, this is just to help you to identify some of this so that you can start praying and asking God to help you deal with it.
Right. So again, most of us think our childhood was normal until we get outside of our own home, and then we start experiencing things and we go, whoa, wait a minute, maybe my childhood wasn't so normal. I remember going and spending, the night by a friend, and, I ate supper there, and she had put something, I think it was, I keep thinking it was Brussels sprouts, cause I hated them. Now I love them, but I hated them when I was growing up, and I remember trying to choke these Brussels sprouts. Oh, I'm trying to eat them, and my friend's mom came in the kitchen, she's like, honey, if you don't like them, you can just scrape them in the garbage, and I looked at her like, what? Like she just cussed at me. Cause in my home, you just know you're gonna sit there and you're gonna eat that. And you're gonna fall asleep at the table if you, so that was her normal. And her parents, you know, they were, honey, and blah, blah, and I remember asking her, your parents always talk that way? She was like, yeah, I'm like, not mine. It's like totally on my normal. It's crazy. Okay, 2E says, being invaded or abandoned has long-term consequences, and people who have suffered from these wounds begin to see the world with biases, and faulty perceptions. We should have put that up. Remember, one of the levels in the, we're gonna put it up next week.
I can do it now.
No, that's right. One of the levels in the iceberg, if you have your iceberg model, is perceptions, meaning, and core beliefs. So when you have a wound of either way, abandonment or invasion, you develop beliefs about that are faulty. They're usually faulty many times, especially when someone's been invaded. They will think that it's their fault. It's not your fault if you've been invaded. It's never your fault. It's the fault of the person who invaded you. So, but many times that we will start believing faulty beliefs about ourselves and about others. When your needs and desires are not met and or you experience harm, you begin to create beliefs about yourself and the world, which is what I just said, that are not true. These are, if you look on page 2, these are some of these beliefs. I'm ugly, I'm unlovable, it's my fault, God is keeping something from me, I'll never amount to anything. Boy, I used to think that a lot. No one will ever like me. God isn't good. Those are faulty beliefs.
She's been waiting to show you guys this, pay close attention.
I'd like to get bigger ones of this. What happens is, our eyes see the world through a filter. If the filter is healthy, like this nice, clean coffee filter, then we see life clearly. But if the filter is not healthy, like this one that has been used and is brown, could even be browner, we don't see our lives clearly. So if I took clean, pure water and poured it through this filter, what is gonna come out? Cloud, 9 times out of 10. It's gonna be cloudy. This filter is going to affect the water that I poured through it because it's dirty. And this is exactly what happens to us. Someone can have the most pure motive and say, I used to get complimented, I was like, oh, your hair is so pretty. No, it's not, it's so, you know, I was constantly rejecting compliments. Oh, you sing so beautiful. Oh, no, I was off key. You know, it was just crazy. Because my filter had been clouded or dirtied by the experiences I had, the lack of affirmation, the lack of being heard and understood, all affected my filter.
So you can become biased against yourself,
Yeah.
against your abilities, against your dreams and goals. And that self-bias is worse than any bias that we show. You know, I'm biased, I love the Packers, I hate the Bears. Nobody big deal, I'm biased, right? But when I'm biased against myself, that no, I couldn't be smart, no, I didn't really do a good job, like she was just saying, you're turning down compliments, or you're denying gifts that other people see in you, they'd be very frustrating to you, right? Hey, Eric, you're great at this. No, if Eric's been wounded, he might know because to accept that makes us a little bit more vulnerable. We might actually think about pursuing that anyway. So we can become biased in our perception. Hold that up to your face. So you're seeing through the filter. I was joking before, but you're seeing through the filter, right? This is how we see the world, and so if my filter is brown, then I'm gonna be biased in my perception of everything. Remember the story about the dirty clothes? They were not dirty at all. The lady looking through her window had a dirty window. So everything she looked at was gonna be dirty. That's our perception. Those filters are awesome.
I thought so. I'd like to have gotten them bigger, but I didn't have bigger paper, I just had this size.
Talk to Dorothy.
I know, I should have. Okay, H there says, we all seek for meaning in everything that happens to us. When we've been harmed, you make meanings about things you see, and you create assumptions of what others are doing, which can be correct, but are often not. And we usually, as human beings, lean towards negative. So, I think I said this last week, so if I'm walking down the hall and Dorothy's coming towards me and I say, hey Dorothy, and she just keeps walking and doesn't talk to me, I'm gonna try to find meaning in that. And a lot of times, my meaning is gonna come out of the experiences I've already had. If I've been rejected as a child, if I've experienced these wounds, any one of these wounds, that is going to, what's the word? That's going to help me form a meaning. And, you know, I usually will lean towards the negative. You know, what happened? What did I do? Why is Dorothy angry with me? She didn't say anything back to me. You know, that's just kind of what we do. We form the meaning based on experiences we've had. What happens if we allow ourselves to be healed of those is we will then lean more towards the other person. What's going on in Dorothy's life? What's happening that she didn't say hi? I wonder if something's wrong. I'm gonna pray for her. And that's like a totally different avenue to go down. This avenue is, I'm licking my wounds, I'm looking at myself. This avenue is my wounds are healed and I can focus on other people. That has been the biggest blessing in my life. Where I used to be, all I could think about was me and me and me and woe is me. And then God started doing the healing, and I can look at others, and instead of in all the different circumstances, not just if Dorothy doesn't talk to me.
The healing overcomes the biases and the perceptions. So the biases and perceptions work together, right? My bias is against the Bears, and so I think they're not as smart, I think they're not as good, and those are biases and perceptions. I don't even know all the Bears fans. But because I'm biased, based on my belief and my past experience that I love the Packers, that's how I go through life, and that's why it's important to heal these issues and not sweep them under the rug. Because emotion literally are pockets of energy in our body. That's why sometimes you get so emotional, it's really God telling you, you need to resolve this. So he's bringing it up like a headache. And then it doesn't go away, maybe go away and come back.
And then the last one there, without a safe place to talk about your faulty beliefs, you hide these thoughts away and begin to act out the feelings that accompany disappointments and false beliefs about yourself and the world. And again, that's what happens when we end up trying to get into relationships. And believe us, everyone has some type of wound of some type. Some are a lot stronger, a lot deeper. And people come together, it's just like magnetized. Mike and I, he was raised in Georgia, I was raised in Wisconsin. He came up here in '74. We ended up in the same homeroom. Of all the people in the world.
Not just the same school.
Yeah, not just the same school. When he lived on the north side, I lived on the south side. He ended up they had the busing at the time where they were integrating the schools. I mean, and of all the people in the world, him and I end up together. Mr. Wound of, nobody loves me, everyone's gonna leave me. Jackie with the low self-esteem. It was crazy. It was just crazy. He would not let me out of his sight. I thought, oh, he loves me. No, it wasn't love, it was control
And abandonment.
because of his wounds. So it's like people
Yeah,
with,
so both my parents were alcoholics. We have new people. Both my parents were alcoholics. They abandoned me at birth, essentially. And so I grew up thinking I was unlovable and that everybody important to me was gonna leave.
I was raised in a family where I never had affirmation, we weren't heard and understood, we were put down all the time. I have 3 sisters, all 4 of us ended up seeking out love in all the wrong places, and so him.
I was wrong.
Yeah, you were. Sorry to tell you, but yeah, you were. So it's like people with these wounds, they'll just gravitate towards each other like magnets. And then once they're together, it's like put the boxing gloves on. So, you know. Unless somebody has questions or comments about
That was a lot of info she gave me there. You're all taking it in and pondering and mulling it over. That's fine. That is
We
fine.
just always like to give opportunity.
Yes, in case you have a question or a comment. All right, lastly, we're gonna talk about expectations. So these wounds lead to biases and perceptions, the experiences that we've had, and those things lead to expectations. So most of us tell people how we want to be treated. It is almost like going out to eat and the waitress comes up or a waiter and they say, what would you like? And you say, hey, give me a steak, make it 20 ounces, medium rare, saute it in some onions, and you tell them what you want. Or in some weirdos cases, they eat salads when they go out to eat. I don't know what that's all about, but difference, right? So our expectations become like signals that we tell people in a lot of ways how we want to be, how we expect to be treated. I told you either last week or the week before, when I was doing domestic abuse counseling, the guys would tell me in group, yeah, I knew she was a victim, but by the way she carried herself. I could tell she didn't have any confidence, that she didn't expect to be treated good, she didn't expect to be treated with respect, and so we send these, not just domestic abuse victims, all of us send these like messages out, signals of how we expect to be treated. And so our expectations come from those experiences she was talking about being invaded or abandoned or traumatized in some other way. We get the biases. Oh, she had a friend, still is, a dear friend from childhood, that the friend's husband, when she got married, she found out that a African-American guy had killed their sister or something. And so when they first met me, they were like, hey, I didn't do it. That was a bias against a whole group of people based on something one person did, right? And so the perception was that all African Americans are murderers. And so actually kind of helped them get over that, right? To the point where he invited us over to the house. Well, she had always been over there. He invited me, that was a huge step for him, right? Because his sister was killed by an African-American guy. So based on that experience, he developed, the whole family had a bias. You understand what I'm saying? So what happens is, then there's an expectation. A bias is something that is not founded in fact. That's why they're so, I don't know it for a fact that all Bear fans are crazy. I wanna believe that because I'm a Packer fan. I don't know anything, that's my bias, and so my perception is, well, it must be true, we keep beating them, and then my expectation is that we're gonna beat them again. It just follows in line. All right, so let's talk about expectations. An expectation is simply an unexpressed need or hope, right? So when I'm sending out those signals, this is how I expect you to treat me. Then when I get treated that way, that's called confirmation bias. It confirms my belief, right? So some people believe, all police are racist or brutal. It's ridiculous. They get, again, judged by one or two or a few people. And so if they go have an encounter and they happen to run into a police, they are human, and they're having a little bit of a bad day, well, see, I told you, then it becomes a confirmation bias. What you're doing is you are attracting that behavior by the way you present yourself. So it's an unexpressed need or hope. To expect is to anticipate in the mind some occurrence or outcome, right? So we begin to anticipate, this is how I'm gonna go to this group, but it's gonna be just like any other group. What's the big deal? I expect that they won't know what they're talking about, blah, blah, blah. The girls and the boys that I work with at Lab Lake, they do the same thing, right? And then I start doing groups and some of the other counselors, and then they literally say, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to learn anything. I didn't expect that you would understand. And so I start telling my story, oh, hey, you think you got it bad? Both of my parents were alcoholics and they gave me away. I literally had boys and girls jerk in class. What? Oh, I thought you just had a perfect life. No, bro. No, you're looking at Mr. Screwed Up here. My parents gave me away, and I went through all kinds of abandonment and rejection and all of that stuff. Then we start to make a connection. They're starting to say to me, you understand me. So the expectation starts to change based on our collective experience, right? So to expect is anticipate in the mind some occurrence or outcome, look forward to, count on, assume, or insist upon. So a lot of times that's where we land. We insist that people treat us in a certain way based on our expectations, our biases, those perceptions based on the negative experiences we've had, right? We insist that you treat me this way. So we see a lot of shootings and stuff around this. I demand that you not disrespect me. So when I was working in the prison system, I think I told you this, I met a guy who was telling me about, he was on like year 18 of like 45 or something. I'm thinking, oh my God. I'm talking to this guy, so well, what happened? So I killed the guy. Well, what happened? He said, I was in the club with my guys, we were all dressed nice, and we were actually leaving the club, and another group of 2 or 3 guys were coming in, and he had a drink, and this first guy bumped him, and the drink spilled on his clothes. Bam! Dropped him right there. 1st degree intentional murder. And he ended up with like 45 years. Like I said, when I met him, he was on year like 18 straight. And he was like, oh man, I wish I would have been in your group before. I wish I had, met you as a teenager. But his expectation was that was disrespect. And so he insisted on not being disrespected. When you have an issue, so if I twist my ankle, I better do it on the right one, and I'm hopping around, and she says, hey, let's go get that taken care of, let's go to the doc, get some x-rays. No, we're not going to the doc. I just suspect that you're gonna help me all the time. You're gonna be my human cane. This is okay, right? This is what we do in relationships. I'm not gonna deal with my problem, but you're gonna help me. Oh, I didn't mean that. I don't know my strength sometimes. This is what we do. I got a problem, but I'm not fixing it. In fact, you're gonna become my human cane. You're gonna become a part of my solution. I'm gonna insist on it. So then we insist on not changing, and what happens is, she begins to run away. She's pulling away like, I can't be your king. I got a life to live, you know, you can go get some help for this. B, expectations in and of themselves are not the problem. The problem starts when our expectations are so deep-seated that we cannot articulate them to ourselves, let alone to anyone else. So, way back I taught you about denial, that you're denying that you have an issue, that there is no problem, you deny the need to change and for love and all of this stuff. Remember, so those of you who were here, you remember that like the back of your hand, right? Study it 2-3 times a week, right? Liars. But this is what's happening. When we deny, okay, they're so deep-seated that we will not admit them to ourselves and we will not admit them to someone else. So this is the dance of the porcupine. Porcupines are terribly shy animals. They generally come out at night, and like us, they were created for relationship, right? So they seek each other out, generally out in the forest, somewhere in the woods, wooded areas. And then as they are coming together, they get afraid because their expectation is I'm gonna get hurt. And the quills come out, and then they run away and they do this, and it's the dance of the porcupines. This is like what we do. I love you, I love you, I love you, I wanna be in a relationship with you, but I need you to be my cane. I'm not gonna change. I'm not gonna even tell you how this got hurt, because I don't think about it myself, right?
And then all we can see is the behavior that comes with it. Usually negative.
3C, in our imperfect world, our hopes to have all that we need and desire are dashed, and we are left to figure out how we will acquire them in a healthy way. So the need doesn't go away. I still got this twisted ankle. So you're not gonna be my king? Oh, I really know it. Then I'm gonna hop over here and find somebody else to be my king. Right? Because the need and the desire doesn't go away. What we need to do is to try to figure out how to get these things in a healthy way, which requires us to be honest, which requires us to do away with our biases, which requires us to change our perception and change our expectations. And the only way we can do that is to confront the issues and change our beliefs. From this place, we develop expectations of others to help us meet those needs and desires. 3D. Unexpressed expectations are the pathway to resentment and anger. So when I don't express expectations, we're gonna talk about this in a different lesson, but I'll give you a little taste. We call it a landmine. And some of it can be a trigger. So here's the difference. Landmines are planted intentionally to harm or kill. So our youngest two boys both went to Iraq. One is a Marine, one is a Army National Guard, and you know, one was there 6 months, one was there 9 or 10 months, and I'd be sitting in the living room, and if a car slowed down in front of our house, you know, I thought it was gonna be a death notification, and we were praying all the time, and the Marine, the youngest kid, said that, you know, he was in a tank, and every day, there's 3 or 4 people assigned to the tank. One person had to get out and walk in front of the tank to discover the landmines, make sure there were no landmines. This is when you get killed or hurt, seriously. And he said that was his scariest point of being when his day came, you know, all right, Williams, and you be out there trying to see these landmines. So landmines are planted intentionally to harm or kill. Triggers are often emotional things that are hidden that you've tried to push down, and something happens in the moment and boom, they come up, right? That's why we need to resolve our issues when we're calm, when we're sober, when on our terms, because under certain situations, you can be triggered, and then it's too late. You know, you blah, all over someone, and now you're like, oh, would you please forgive me? Well, I don't know, you're kinda crazy. You went off at the birthday party because a balloon popped, and now you're hurt, and you want them to forgive you now, and so you're doing the kind of mind rape thing. What I just did to you wasn't really that bad, just get over it. That's not where you wanna be. So you wanna plan to deal with these triggers. And you want to not intentionally plant landmines. We love planting landmines in relationships. I'm not gonna tell her that this movie makes me go off. I'm gonna let her turn it on because, you know, in the West, we believe that if you love each other, you can read my mind. Why you turn that movie on? And she looked at me like, what kind of crazy are you? Well, that movie, okay, but how would I know that? That's a landmine. We love to do this in relationships. Now, you guys don't wanna admit it. You're trying to say it with a straight face, but you love planting landmines and let somebody step on it, because then you give yourself permission to wham, let them have it. Guess what that does? She doesn't wanna be close to me, because I'm a landmine. What's gonna happen next? People begin to say your behavior is erratic. You're up and you're down, and I don't know when you're gonna go, I don't know where the landmines are planted, right? I don't know what's gonna trigger you. All right, we'll talk about that. Another lesson, 3D, unexpected expectations are the pathway to resentment and anger. So a lot of resentment and anger can be traced right back to an unmet need or expectation. Having expectations that are not talked about leads to disappointment and distance in relationships. Now, because we got a little time, I'm gonna give you guys something for free. I don't always do this, so it's kind of, but it just hit me, right? So, there's like 4 natural healing agents that God has given us. But as soon as we get resentful and we get angry, we stop using these natural healing agents. One of them is conversation. One of the ways you can get healed is you talk about it. Even if you have to make an appointment, like going to see the dentist or the doc, you need to talk about it. It's a natural healing agent, doesn't cost, unless you're going to a counselor, doesn't cost you anything. God gave it to us naturally, right? Number 2 is emotional connections. Taking a walk, holding hands, watching a Hallmark movie, you know. Natural, emotional connections. Again, often doesn't cost us anything other than maybe some time and vulnerability to be honest about it. We love watching movies together. I love the CIA, FBI mystery, trying to figure out movies. I love those. She likes the Hallmark stuff, you know. Everybody gets it. Then there's the physical.
I'm gonna preface this by saying this is for
Married people, yeah.
No
Single
stop.
people can't get the.
Single people can get so far.
Single people cannot get physical. So and then spiritual. So, you know, when we start counseling with couples, usually we tell them you need to talk to each other for 15 minutes a day, 7.5 minutes each. Get a timer, clock, egg timer, whatever. You need to have some emotional connections. You need to go for some walks and hold hands, or, you know, go to a movie, something emotional. Physical for the married people, you need to make the movie. And number 4, you need a spiritual connection. You need to be praying together and going to church. Now these are natural. Guess what we do when we get resentful and angry? I stop talking. We're not making any, because you can't make an emotional connection without verbal. stop talking, stop emotional connection. She says, there ain't be no physical. She gets out the one piece with the zipper that comes all the way up. Good night. I know what's up. Oh, all right. We got on the onesie. So there's not gonna be any physical, and then there's not gonna be any spiritual. I'm not going to church with you, there are a bunch of hypocrites over there, and so then you can't heal. And so then people come to counselors like me and they say, well, help me. I can't help you, because you refuse to do this. These are free. All right, that was free, sorry. Where was that? E, was it on E?
Yes.
When we live with unspoken expectations of others, we are like a minefield that others have to surf through and dismantle the mines, but they have no idea where they are. The person trying to help you is set up for failure. Right? So we got all these mines, watch these other stuff right on that one. F, when abuse or abandonment occurs, remember those invasive behaviors we started out talking about, abuse or abandonment occurs, we create false meanings and beliefs about ourselves and others. It's amazing what we believe about ourselves and other people, right? Oh, I'm unlovable. Really? Nobody loves you? That was my thing. And the lady who took me in loved me to death. But I wanted to be loved by my parents, and so so at 9 I get drunk for the first time, just like my mom and dad, and I'm like, ooh. This feels good because I feel numb, I don't feel anything. Alcohol is used as a depressant. Years ago, like in the Civil War, it could be used as a anesthesia. Didn't work too well, but it would lessen some of the pain. Why was I talking about that? Other search to the mandate, but they have the person trying to help us is set up for failure. F, O. Because it comes from false meanings and beliefs about ourselves and others. We begin to think that we don't have value, and thus we shouldn't have any needs or expectations. Right? And so when you don't feel like you have value, it's hard for someone else to value you, because you don't value yourself. Right? And so I work with people, adults and kids, who wanted to commit suicide, and they just didn't want to live in it, and they could barely get out of a chair because they had allowed all the energy in their body to leave because they didn't believe they were valuable. And so trying to convince them that, no, you have value and you don't really want to do this, and because the only thing suicide does is guarantee you can't get fixed because it's over. But people think, well, I'm in pain and it's going to stop the pain. Yeah, but it stops everything you can't get fixed. G, we can also create unrealistic expectations from the wound in our lives. These expectations serve to comfort our wounds. So Jackie was telling you earlier what controlling behavior from me looked like. I was so madly in love with her as a teenager. We started dating in our junior year, 77 or something like that. She finally agreed to go out with me because I like to say, and this is true, she was National Honor Society and I was National Pothead Society. So, we were going in two
Talk
different
about
directions.
opposites attracting. Oh.
I mean, I couldn't get her to go across the street and smoke some weed, and, what was so hard about that? Oh, it's 3rd and 4th hour. What did I care about?
Chemistry.
Anyway, what was I gonna say? For crying out loud, you keep distracting me. Unrealistic expectations. So, because I had these beliefs, unrealistic beliefs, she's shaking over here now, about being abandoned and unlovable, I tried to make Jackie meet all of those needs. And so, I have no faith in God, I have no confidence in myself, so the only way I feel like I can do this is I gotta be with Jackie all the time. So she would say, hey, this Saturday I'm gonna go shopping with one of my friends. Sure. And as we got closer to Saturday, no, I don't think that's a good idea. You need to be with me, and I would disrupt the plans because I was insecure from my own invasive behaviors and abandonment from my parents. And And so I have biases that, hey, I don't want you getting too close to this girl. I want you to be here. My perception is that, you know, you might leave me. And so I was controlling. At first she thought it was love. Then she realized this guy's got problems. It's misogynistic behavior, actually. G, we can also, oh, I said that. H, the healthiest thing to do is to articulate your expectations, which means you need to talk about them. You may not get them met, but just naming them can be freeing. Right? And ultimately, we need to give our expectations to God and trust Him to work things out for us. All right, any questions or comments? I know that was a lot of information, but you're gonna read this. Hopefully when you read it now, it'll make more sense to you. You know, not that you're not intelligent, but we want the reading to be good for you. Any questions or comments?
So, how do you get the deep-seated problems that some of us cannot articulate, let alone tell somebody else about it? We don't know what will help us. We don't know how to fix ourselves.
So the last one is correct. We don't know how to fix ourselves. What I have found in my life and doing a lot of counseling is we don't want to talk about these things because they're so painful. It's not that we don't know. I know exactly where my pain began. I'm 63 now. My pain began really when I was old enough to realize that my parents had abandoned me. That the lady who took me in wasn't my mom. At that very moment, I started feeling abandoned and rejected and unloved. Now, I didn't talk about that until I was about 21 or 22, and we had been married 3 years. We got married at 18, 6 months out of high school. I didn't tell her that until I was 21 or 22 when we started going to church, and she became a Christian, and we were going in 2 different ways. For a couple months, we had lived apart because she kicked me out, and that's when I started realizing what I really wanted was my wife and my daughter. We had a little girl at the time. Thankfully, she doesn't remember this. She was about 18 months old. But I didn't want to talk about it because it hurt. It wasn't that I knew exactly where it started. So I'm just gonna challenge you a little bit. Most of the time is it's too painful, or you think it's too painful, or you're too embarrassed to talk about it. Right? Particularly if you were invaded, if you were sexually assaulted or something, if you were abandoned like me, lots of people don't want to talk about it. So they will often say, I don't know what's going on. And if you truly don't know, then you definitely need to pray and ask God to reveal it to you. But 9 times out of 10, you know what it is. It's too painful to talk about, or you're too embarrassed about it, and you keep it pushed down. Good question. Any other questions?
For landlines, I guess we haven't talked about this yet, but like, I guess, what are some good things to help, one, like recognize when you're putting those in place, and 2, in the moment if someone does like trigger one or something on them, what is a good action to take?
So Nate asked 2 good questions. What is a good way to recognize that you're planting landmines? And then what do you do if someone steps on one? So it takes a great deal of honesty. Here's what's going on with me. When I was young, my parents abandoned me. So that gives her information that I might have some problems with abandonment, and it might help her to understand why I behave so controlling. So I need to be honest and vulnerable enough to share it. But the best way to keep people from stepping on landmines is to warn them and remove the landmine before they have the opportunity to, right? So that requires us, we taught you this, to think ahead, plan ahead, so that it's as if you were gonna take somebody out. Hey, it's my turn to pick this Friday. I get to pick the restaurant, or if we just stay home. So I'm thinking ahead, where do I wanna take Jack? Do we just go to the Olive Garden that we've been to before, or is there some place? So I'm thinking ahead and I'm planning ahead. I'm gonna pick her up at 4:30 from work. We're gonna take this route. I'm thinking ahead and planning ahead. That's how the landmine gets removed before someone has the chance to. So it's a really, it's a me thing. I have to do the work ahead of time.
And you can identify landmines in your own life by the way you react to things. If something causes you to, explode about something, chances are there's a landmine there.
Kinda like when Mike used to go out and get drunk and stoned and stuff, then you learned how to not get worked up about it.
Right, not.
I have a
to-
question for you though, Jackie. When-
Hold on, hold your question,
Yeah.
cause that's a great, so I would create landmines. He's talking about something I shared in class. I would go out, get drunk and party, and then on my way home, I would write the script of how I wasn't gonna be held accountable. If I walk in a house and she asks me where I've been, or she says, this is wrong, I'm gonna smash that table, I'm gonna start yelling, I never hit Jackie, but I would smash a table, I start yelling and swearing, that was a landmine. I wasn't upset, I was just out partying. I was not upset. But I began to use that behavior so that I would not be held accountable. You know what I'm saying? And so it was a script, it was just like a movie that played. I'd be sitting in the car driving, yep, if she asked me where I've been or anything, I'm gonna blow up, and it was pre-programmed behavior. Your question?
Did you question when you get home? Where were you? Who were you with? Did you see another girl? Were you drunk? Did you get stoned? Did you hit them with all these questions, or what was it like?
Not after I decided to change, no.
Before, yeah.
Before I did, yes. That's what would trigger the whole thing. You'd walk in the door and
Where
wham
were
on.
you?
Where were you? Why aren't you home? Blah, blah, blah.
But listen to what I'm saying. It wasn't a true trigger that I had buried years ago,
No.
and the circumstance caused it to fire. It was a pre-planned, just 10 minutes ago. About 10 minutes from home, I magically remember, oh yeah, I'm married and we have a daughter. So I don't wanna be held accountable. I don't wanna stop partying and having fun. So I would write a script. If she asks me where I've been, or I'm gonna blow up. I'm gonna become a human landmine. But that wasn't even the real true landmine that comes from emotional abuse and abandonment. Mine was pre-programmed. I want you to clearly understand that. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew because physically she couldn't stop me. I would say to her, I'm gonna do it again tomorrow. And I would.
Then
Like an idiot.
eventually you started opening up those natural agents, the conversation, you started talking about your past and your old beliefs, and she started understanding a little more. Is that kinda how it went?
So what happened was, Jackie started praying and reading the Bible. I didn't know it. So she stopped fighting with me. Cause I would come home and she would either be in bed asleep, or she just wouldn't say anything to me. And it kinda took the fun out of it for me. So she starts praying and attending church and reading the Bible. And I could see such a change in her, I began to wonder, does she still love me? So the fighting and stuff, I thought maybe she had a guy sneaking in the back door when I was leaving. She did not. But that's what the change was so different. So that began to draw me back toward her over some months, that something is different. She told me, she said, listen, I'm gonna serve God, I love you. I don't wanna get a divorce, but if you choose to do it this way, it's gonna be on you. Wow, how much fun was that? I need you to be mad about this, and begging me not to leave. And she took control of her own sanity, which is what we're trying to teach you. You can't control the other person, but you can influence the other person. When she changed and quit fighting with me, I began to wonder, how is she so peaceful? And then over some months, she invites me to go to church. And I thought she had been telling this pastor everything in our life. Cause he was sitting up there talking about you're running from God, you feel unlovable, you feel hurt, you're using drugs. You're snitching me out. She said, and Jackie would never lie to me. She said, I asked him to pray for me. We're driving home in the car, I'm thinking, man, if she didn't tell me. So the next Sunday I go, it's like he picks up right where there's somebody here that's hurting, you're running from God, and you know, I'm like, surely you told them. She said, no. The next Sunday I go back, and this guy says, God told me not to end the service until this person gets saved. Let go of whatever you're holding. I'm holding up. I'm in the back of the church at the last pew, like, let's go, just say amen. And he said, I'm not. He said, let go of it. Then I was so I let go, and I felt a warm hand in my back. So I think it's Jackie. And he said, come to the altar. I'm the only black guy in a 350-person white church in Bayview. So I start walking down the altar, the aisle, and all the white people are looking at me. Who is this guy? And I'm thinking Jackie is walking behind me, and I feel this warm hand. I get to the altar. There ain't no Jackie. I believe it was the Holy Spirit. She's still in the pew. Pastor comes up and lays hands. Some other people come and lay hands on this guy, this brother, and we prayed the sinner's prayer. It was not perfect, but I would change. I had already quit drinking and smoking. So now we're headed in the same direction. Then we began to work on this. We began to have intentional conversations that I had hid from. We began to have emotional encounters that I had hid from, because I'm a man, I don't cry, that's for women, blah, blah, blah. You know, I always wanted to do the physical. And then now we're reading the Bible and praying together. So those 4 healing agents. Now you guys did this to yourself. It's 8:25. I stopped at 8:15 and said, do you have any questions? You have kids in the nursery, you need to haul. Because I don't want them coming looking for me. You don't have kids